And good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday morning. I'd like to begin with a little story about a character that you may or may not have heard of. He's a fictional character, and yet he's very, very real. He's sometimes called the wise teacher, or the foolish wise man. He teaches wisdom through what appears to be craziness to us. But it helps us realize that what we call our everyday life may be craziness in one sense, and there may be a lot of wisdom in foolishness sometimes. So here's the story. Nasruddin, in this particular story, he looks like a leftover hippie, a hippie that's about 50 years old. And sandals, long beard, et cetera, et cetera. And he finds himself in a bank in New York City, let's say Chase Manhattan Bank, downtown New York City, uptown. And he walks up to the teller with a check for a very large sum of money in his hand, and he gives it to the teller. He says, "Sir, I'd like to cash this check." And the teller looks at the check, and then he looks at Nasruddin, and he's not too sure. So he says, "Sir, before I can cash your check, I need some identification. Can you identify yourself, please?" So Nasruddin said, "I think I can." As he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a mirror. He looked at the mirror and he said, "Yes, that's me." Now, I think we're real familiar with the foolishness in that. Do you catch the wisdom in that? What was it that the teller expected him to do? Did he expect him to pull out a mirror? He expected him to pull out some kind of a card, right? And typically, that's the way we respond to the question, how can you identify yourself? We usually reach for our wallet or purse, some kind of a card, some kind of an identification, something the world says this is who you are. So the card symbolizes what the world tells us. But what does the mirror symbolize? The mirror is what we see directly. It's when we look right at ourselves. We say, yes, that's really me. But we're so deeply conditioned to reach for the card, as it were. We're so deeply conditioned to respond to the world in the way in which we were taught to be, in the way in which the world tells us we are. The world says this is who you are. It told us that from the day we were born, and it's still telling us that. And now we're telling the world who we are. But unfortunately, most of what we tell the world is what we've been told. So we really don't know who we are. We're simply aware of who we've been taught to be. Teacher Ram Dass used to always say, when we're born, we immediately go into somebody training. We're taught to be somebody, right? We're born nobody. We have no idea who we are when we're born. But unfortunately, we're surrounded by people that will tell us who we are. And typically, the people that tell us who we are don't have a clue who they are. Okay? So they're telling us who they want us to be. They want us to be a good boy or a good girl, or they want us to be smart or a football player or whatever you say. And typically that's on some aspect, sometimes an unfulfilled aspect of their own desires and dreams. It's what they want us to be. But we're never, I should say not never, but rarely are we taught to be who we really are. We're taught to be who we should be, who we're supposed to be. You see. So life is always asking us, who are you? I mean, every decision you make, every relationship you have, everything you say, everything you do is responding to the question, who are you? So who you are shows up in all sorts of ways. We may think it shows up in the ways we want it to, but it shows up in every way in which we are. The Buddha taught that one of the primary causes of suffering is what he called delusion. And what's a delusion? What's the difference between an illusion and a delusion? An illusion is when we don't know what's true and what's not true. A delusion is when we believe that what's not true is true. You see, when I see something that's not there, I'm deluded. You see, when I see something that's not there, I may be looking in an illusion. When I think that's me, I'm really deluded. So that's the real problem. You know, if you've ever saw the wonderful movie, It's a Beautiful Mind, the story of the mathematician John Nash, and he's in the movie interacting with all these characters, and you don't know till at least halfway through the movie, these characters are not real, you see. They're portraying the world through his eyes, not through our eyes. And he discovers halfway through the movie that not everybody sees and relates to the things that we see and we relate to. And sometimes for us, halfway through our life, we discover not everybody sees the world and relates to the world and relates to the same things that we are, you see. We may be fighting battles that ended 30 or 40 years ago. We may be trying to please people that died 20 years ago, you see. We're trying to respond to the world as we think we should, but everything about what we think we should be doing is simply a message from the past. Because there is no should other than what's here and what's now, what's real, you see. So do we respond to reality as it is and look in the mirror? Or do we respond to reality as we think it should be and grab one of our cards? And unfortunately, the state of the world today is what happens when everybody looks at their card and says, this is who I am, this is who you're supposed to be, and I'm right, and somehow you're always wrong. It's amazing how that works out, isn't it? And no matter who we are, we're right. Huh? You know, how many times have you heard somebody say, I'm going to tell you something, what I'm telling you is absolutely wrong? Not very often, right? And everybody will say, what I'm telling you is the absolute truth, even though they contradict each other, you see. So we get confused as to what's real. And we believe that who we think we are is real. There's the problem. And even those of us that are trying to escape sometimes get deluded in our attempt to escape. How many times do I hear somebody saying, well, you know, I'm really working on my ego now. I sort of have this picture of, who Who's working on whom? Who's working on the ego? So I sort of imagine that it's like working on your car. You know, you got your ego up on a lift with a wrench in your hand. You know, I got to fix this or I got to fix that, you know. So some time ago, Victor and I developed a little shtick about the karma mechanics. You know what a car mechanic is. We were karma mechanics, you see. So we would deal with the issues that people had with their karma. They'd bring their ego in, maybe they'd call in the repair shop and say, well, I'd like to get my 3,000 lifetime checkup. You know, it's like the ego mobile is not working as well as it used to. And so can you fix it for me? And that's usually what we try to do. We try to fix our ego like we're trying to fix our car. And all we're doing is we're changing one delusion for another. Because we actually have two egos in a way. We have the ego that says, this is who I am. And then we have an ego that says, this is who I should be, called the ego ideal. And both of them are complete delusions, but yet they will drive our life more than anything else. Who am I? Who should I be? And always the answer is some kind of a card that says, this is who you are, this is who you should be. We spend our whole life trying to shorten the distance between those two. And if we are unlucky and don't make it, then we keep on trying. If we're lucky and we do make it, we realize that we've been deluded our whole life. And that feels lousy. And yet, even though it feels lousy, it's the beginning of freedom. Disillusionment is the dying of an illusion. So the first step to awakening may be disillusionment. And oftentimes that's when people want to leave. You know, they leave the practice, that is. They'll say, this isn't fun anymore. I'm going to go look for something else to do. And but unfortunately, we can't run away from ourselves for very long. It's going to catch up with us sooner or later. So why doesn't it work to work with the ego? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't work. We're trying to change something that's not real. You see, the ego really doesn't exist. And what do I mean by ego? By ego, I mean that which we think we are. You know, this sense of Robert, this sense of Victor, this sense of me. Quite literally, that's what ego means. It means me, the feeling of me, the sense of me. Now, it's really, the ego doesn't like to be told that it's an illusion. You know, it's very insulted by that. What do you mean I'm an illusion? Illusion. You know. But when we discover that we're an illusion, it's a mixed bag. There's the disillusionment of like, oh, geez, I've been lied to for 20, 30, 40 years. I've been lied to my whole life. Yes, that's true. And the other side of it is, I finally found out what's true. You see, Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, you will, no, this is in John, I believe it is, John. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. It didn't say that first, however, he said, first it will piss you off a lot. That part was taken out by the church fathers, you see. It will make you free, but it's not an easy trip of freedom. Some of us would rather stay in our delusions, you know. And that's always a choice point. I want to stay comfortable in my delusion, or I want to be uncomfortable in my awakening. That's a choice, you see. So we can't get rid of something that's not real. So how do we get rid of delusion? Well, if there's something that's not real and we think it's real, what do? You look for it. It's what I called the ghost in the bedroom. You know, my kids, when they were little, they'd, 2 a.m., some of you know this shtick, 2 a.m., Daddy, Daddy, Mommy, Mommy, there's a ghost in the bedroom. All right, where's the ghost? Under the bed. So we get down, we look under the bed. There's no ghost there. He's in the closet. All right, let's look in the closet. Well, he's in the toy box. So we look at the toy box. So we go through every square inch of the bedroom. Well, maybe the ghost isn't here. Good night, Daddy. Good night, son. Now the child will sleep great, go back to bed and sleep great. Dad tosses and turns the rest of the night. So, but that's how we get rid of what's not true. We look for it. Is it real? So it's almost like a scientist makes a particular hypothesis. Hypothesis being the ego is real. Okay? Let's see if we can prove that's not true. Let's look at it. We look at it. If we look at it long enough and with enough precision, we see that it's just a phony, but it's not real. But most of the time, we don't look long enough. We don't look with detached awareness. We want to fix it to the way we think it should be. I shouldn't be feeling this. This is what I should look like. A spiritual person doesn't feel anger or guilt or whatever it is I feel, you see. I shouldn't be feeling this way. This is not good. So in this practice, we not only pay attention, but we let go of all judgment. What if judgment is there whether we want it to be or not? Look at the judgment. Just keep looking until you can look clearly without judgment at every aspect of what we call ourselves. Sensations in the body. Well, that feels like me, doesn't it? Let's look at them and see what happens to them. Thoughts in the mind. That sure feels like me. Let's look at those thoughts. See what really happens. You see. Emotions, sensations, beliefs, etc., etc. Just look at each one of them. Don't get into an argument. See if you can look at them until there's no judgment left anymore. Until it simply is what it is. And when we can do that without any judgment at all, then that delusion will no longer be there. You see. Krishnamurti would say, the teacher Krishnamurti would say, the highest form of intelligence is to observe without judgment. The highest form of intelligence is to observe without judgment. You see. So, one practice we can employ to let go of the ego is to be aware of the mind and the body. Because typically that's what we call the self. Feelings in the body, thoughts in the mind. This is who I am. I can feel it in my body, this sense of self. In my mind, I can feel a sense of self. Emotionally, I can feel this certain sense of self. Now, I assume all of that's real, you see, until I look at it. When I really look at it, there's nothing there that's real. Every thought moves on. I think A one day, and I think just the opposite of A the next day. I want this, and then 30 seconds later, I want that. Maybe it's just the opposite. I want a donut. I want to lose weight. I want to do this. I want to do that. We're constantly bumping up into ourselves. We're constantly, one thought's fighting with another thought. You know, two illusions. It's like there's a Japanese story about a guy that was on a subway with a little cage. He had this little cage, sort of a little bigger than a bird cage. And in this box, he says, the person next to him said, what do you have in your box? The person responds, he says, well, it's a mongoose. I carried it around because I'm an alcoholic, and every once in a while I have the DTs and I have visions of the snakes all over the place. So I carry the mongoose with me to fight the snakes. And the guy says, well, but you know those snakes are not real. And the guy says, I know. He says, neither is the mongoose. So that's what we do. We have the mongoose and the snake fighting with each other. We'll spend our whole life in that fight, and neither one of them is real, you see. What's real is the person that's watching, that's aware. So that's the thing to do, is to be aware of what's going on, and also to be aware that we are aware of what's going on. And when that happens, then we begin to realize that I am not that which I see. Okay? I am not the ego that I think I'm working on. You see, if I can look at every aspect of what I thought was me, and yet there's still somebody looking, what does that tell me? That's not who I am. See, if I can observe something, I'm not what I'm observing. If I can observe a tree, I'm not a tree. Okay, if I can observe a cloud, I'm not a cloud. So when I observe something, I'm aware of observing it. I know that it's not me. But if I don't look at it, then that ghost is still in the closet, and it jumps out and it says, this is who you really are. And when we believe it, we're in trouble. So I think I'll stop there. We could say a lot more about this, and maybe I will someday in the future, but for now, let's call it a day. Let's take it a moment and just rest, sit for a moment. We'll close by saying, may all beings be free. May all beings know who they really are. May all beings be free from delusion.